ever do it where they don't contact you, and if they don't contact you, that means you didn't get it?
That's the majority of the time,
Okay.
honestly, and that's, yeah, and eventually you just kind of find out through the grapevine that the show is cast. And that's the hardest part, you know, that's the hardest part, especially if you feel like you really got it and you were like, that was a perfect audition, and you just kind of never hear, you're like, oh, bummer. But you know, but there's more, you go to so many auditions, especially if it becomes your career, that you're like, oh, I went to 30 auditions last month. Eventually you just start to forget about them, and you're like, and then when you get a call, you're like, oh my gosh, I got hired, you know, so it just has to become routine as opposed to getting so upset over every audition.
What does it mean to be typed out?
I haven't experienced this a lot, but in New York City, a lot of my friends, when you go to an audition, because there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people there, they'll be like, we're going to type out, and they'll literally go down the line and be like, yes, no, yes, yes, no, 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 just based on your look, which sounds kind of scary, but in a way, it's saving you a lot of time, because if they're looking for people under 5'2", if they're looking for blondes, if they're looking with people with brown eyes, I don't know, and if you don't fit those requirements, they're just saving you time from going in and singing and getting your heart broken if you don't get asked to stay. So, you know, so sometimes it's good, because then you're like, great, you don't need me, I'm gonna go out to lunch, you know. So, so that's what that is.
How much do you get paid in professional theater? Like, I know you said your first one was like $10 a show.
Yeah.
How much?
It really depends. There's shows that are considered stipend shows, which in Chicago, those, because it's called storefront theater, it's kind of people who are like us, performers who just want to create their own theater company. So it's in like small spaces, it's very different, it's not so
Kind
commercial.
of like our space for a mall,
Okay.
you know,
Yeah.
80 people can see that show.
So sometimes, I can't afford to do these anymore, even if it is a great show, but my first gig out of college was for $300 for
A
all,
show? Or-
for the
for the
whole
whole
process.
How long was the run?
It was, we rehearsed for 4 or 5 weeks, and we ran the show for 2 weeks, yeah. It was, and I can't do it again. I mean, the show was awesome, but it's, some theaters do that, and it's.
What's the most you've gotten paid?
It'll probably be for Tokyo Disney.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, you just have to find it. I mean, it's really hard to make a living off of this, but if you kind of figure out how to set up your schedule, and when you're not doing a show, if you can find a job, like a side job that you really love, you know. Like my friend is a Zumba teacher, so she teaches Zumba on the side when she's not doing a show. So it's still dance, it's still staying in shape, and she likes it a lot, so.
Do you sometimes get to choose what part you get? Like okay, you get to be in the show. Do you ever get to choose like who you are, or is it people like, okay, you're this person?
Well, the only thing with that was this theater that I worked in Colorado. I worked there 3 summers now, so once they know you, they're really loyal to the people that they work with, and before the auditions, they said, can you tell us what parts you're interested in? So I said, Fontaine and Les Mis, I said Fiona and Shrek, and so they were like, okay, great, we'll let you read for those. So that's pretty much the closest, but it is helpful, because you're like, oh great, these are roles I want to play, and somebody's gonna let me take a whack at it, you know, as opposed to them being like, no, do this, you know, so, yeah.
Is there a big difference between community theater and professional theater, other than the fact that you don't get paid? Like audition
Yes.
process-wise, or?
Yes, because usually in professional theater, the rehearsal process is like cut in half, because they're usually on a really tight schedule, like,
So is it longer days?
usually,
And just
it's
less?
usually you rehearse during the day, so it'll be like, say you rehearse for 2 weeks, and in those 2 weeks, you'll rehearse from like 9 to 5 or 9 to,
Because that's your job.
yeah.
Okay.
But on some of those stipend shows, they know that you have to have another job to survive because it's $300. So they will rehearse in the evening from like 6 to 10.
Which is mainly what community theaters do.
The shortest rehearsal process I've ever had was 4 days.
How long was the run?
It was the month of December. It was for a Christmas Carol. So.
But you have to come in having like all the
Yes, and that's the difference too. Professional theater, well, you can't. Community theater, you can miss rehearsals for other things because they can't, they're not paying you, so you should be able to do what you want. But professional theater, you can't miss unless you have told them ahead of time, I have to go to a wedding, or if you're deathly ill. But even then, they normally make you come anyway.
One last thing, burning bridges. Tell them what it means and.
It basically means that you either do something or back out of your contract at the last minute without any warning, and they never want to work with you again, which is obviously no, not at all. In any way you can, find a way, if you do have to back out, to let them know as soon as possible, maybe offer them a recommendation of who can replace you, or let them know ahead of time, like, I might have this other job, so I don't want to say no, but